to play the Landorus mirror, which we saw a lot of yesterday, and even the Landorus Registeel mirror, which could be a slower game and would really come down to who is more efficient in the max airstreams. But we can ruminate as much as we like on the teams, looking at them on paper. I think the best thing to do is probably dive on in and just take a look at how the teams play out in the game.
Oh, certainly. So let's get into this game one here. So right off of the bat, Kevin is going for that Porygon 2, paired up with that Grimmsnarl, and on Fevzi's end, that Registeel making an appearance right off of the bat here with the Incineroar by its side.
It's a very defensive, tactical lead, I think, from Kevin. Just trying to establish a board position, maybe set up some support for himself a little bit later on. But there's really not an offensive threat on his side with the Porygon 2 and Grimmsnarl. That said, Fevzi's side is a little light on offensive threats too. Registeel usually needs a little bit of setup, and Incineroar has often been providing more support than it has anything else. I'd be shocked to see this Incineroar start dealing huge damage immediately.
Well, Incineroar eyeing up what Incineroar likes to do best with that fake out. He gets to this Grimmsnarl, can't really do too much on the first turn here, which is always a plus. So this Registeel just gets this free opportunity to go for that Iron Defense. Obviously the defense boost is what it wants, make it difficult to take down and providing more power to that body press. Porygon 2 though, also just looking for the opportunity to do what it does best and go for that Trick Room.
A setup turn for both players. The key Iron Defense landing on that Registeel for Fevzi puts it in a great position to try and do a little bit more in this game. Of course, it body presses after the Iron Defense, and I don't think the Porygon 2 is going to appreciate that. Grimmsnarl and Incineroar just trading off, not getting anything out of the Grimmsnarl, but Incineroar only getting a bit of damage down with the Fake Out. I'd be very curious to see how the Registeel does in the Trick Room. Every time we've seen it so far, it's been supported by something like the Landorus and the Max Airstreams. Registeel is not a particularly pacey Pokemon though, and could capitalize on this Trick Room that Kevin has set up for Fevzi.
Oh, for sure. But Grimmsnarl taking the opportunity to switch out into the Torkoal, a Pokemon that really loves capitalizing off of the Trick Room here, as long as it can stick around long enough to do so. And of course, setting its own sun, bringing a little sunshine into our lives. Porygon 2 just taking the opportunity to fire off a Tri-Attack into the Incineroar, picking up a healthy amount of damage, but Sand Tomb from that Registeel unable to connect, and a taunt just into the Torkoal here.
Really good turn there for Kevin. Gets that Torkoal in, completely unchecked, doesn't take any damage, only gets taunted, which I don't think the Torkoal is too concerned about. That taunt ideally would have been heading towards the Grimmsnarl, and maybe a slight over-prediction or just incorrect prediction from Fevzi there. Throwing down that Sand Tomb towards the Porygon, kind of ignoring the potential that it has to, stay in and throw down these Tri-Attacks, maybe expecting it to switch out to avoid the potential body press. Just remember, it's an open team sheet format. They know about all of their opponent's moves, and while there's going to be very few shocks, I think, on something like the Registeel, it's nice to have that confirmation, and players can make slightly different predictions with that in mind and think a little bit more about how they want to play this one out. But Fevzi's going the whole time in this move timer, really going right down to the last second.
Of course, having to really just think through the decision, the right thing going off against this Torkoal here. So Blastoise is going to be joining in the field in place of that Incineroar, but we are going to see the first max of the game with that Registeel. I don't really think we get to see that as often. Normally it deals enough damage with the body press, gets the Iron Defense, kind of sits there next to a max, but it's having its opportunity to shine here.
It has to do that, because otherwise it's not able to take this huge eruption from the Torkoal. A really wise max from Fevzi, I think.
And a Tri-Attack from the Porygon, looking to just try and clean up the Blastoise. It didn't get the KO, but it did get the bird instead, so essentially the same thing. Of course, Registeel living after that max eruption, after the eruption in its max, gets the opportunity to fire off an attack back into the Torkoal. A nice special defense boost, something that's definitely going to be nice against these two Pokemon, and a little bit of leftovers recovery just to be a little bit of a menace out on this field.
That Blastoise is immediately felled though by the burn from Tri-Attack. One of the key reasons players love to use that move is it has all of those options for secondary effects, and that one working out fantastically for Kevin there. So this Blastoise, once again, I think it's the second time we've seen it so far in Players Cup 4, and another game where it was just a little bit underwhelming. No Gigantamax, no huge attacks. so really limited, and Fevzi still a little bit up against it with this Trick Room and Torkoal staring him down. The Torkoal's still able to do huge damage, going to be really clinging on, trying to make sure another special defense boost comes through. And looking at the Registeel, it's kind of interesting to see it as the Dynamax option. It loses access to the very powerful body press. The body press obviously boosted by the earlier iron defense, and not being able to capitalize off that as well with a Max Knuckle, I think is very, very curious. There's the responding Dynamax from Kevin, though.
Speaking of curious, this little turtle taking the opportunity to Dynamax as well, which means this fake out from the Incineroar is doing nothing but the tiniest little amount of chip. This Torkoal firing off a Max Flare, of course, boosted in the sun, is just dealing devastating damage, and this Registeel, despite trying its best to withstand this Torkoal's wrath, is going to be going down.
Really good use of the Dynamax mechanics there by Kevin, acknowledging that, hey, the Incineroar's coming back in, I probably need to play smart around it a little bit and respect that fake out. Torkoal might not be the premium Dynamax candidate on every team, but in this matchup, it works out so well for him. He avoids the fake out, is able to fire back with the Max Flare and take out that Registeel. So a very, very low impact Dynamax from Fevzi here could be putting him up against it. This Landorus has a whole lot of work to do, but it's playing in a Trick Room for another couple of turns, so is going to struggle to land those attacks, and this Torkoal may just be able to keep throwing down huge damage. The sun's already up, the Max Flares are hitting really, really hard, and it's all on the Landorus to deal the requisite amount of damage to take out 4 Pokemon with a little bit of help from this Incineroar. I don't see Torkoal going anywhere in this turn, though.
Of course not, and we see that Max Flare coming out and just cleaning up the KO, right? Just one hit KO, just taking it right off of the board. The one thing that could have actually threatened it in a non-Trick Room situation. And Porygon 2 not wanting to be left out, just looking to clean up the KO on the Incineroar as well. So Kevin in a very dominant showing in game 1 there, and is going to be taking the advantage going into this game 2. Porygon 2, the perfect little partner by its side to be following up with those tri-attacks, really just put in a dominant performance. So it's time for this game 2 to see how Fevzi is going to be reacting to try and get a leg up in this competition. And Grimmsnarl Porygon 2 to start. I mean, if it worked the first game, why swap it up now? But Fevzi, of course, with a big change here. The Incineroar is coming back out, but paired with the Thundurus this time around. That's
a definite positive change for him, I think. Being able to change things up, being able to apply pressure a little bit differently, it's certainly a win for him in this one. And curiously enough, you know, we've got access to Taunt on both the Pokemon on Fevzi's side, so looking to use that as the way to shut down a Trick Room, I'd imagine.
Yeah, the ultimate Trick Room hate coming out from Fevzi here, understandably so. Fevzi seemed not wanting to really fare in Trick Room, so Incineroar taking the opportunity to go for that fake out. Opposing Grimmsnarl from Kevin, though, with the taunt into the Thundurus, which means it won't be able to do anything next turn, but this turn just looking to be firing off a Thunderbolt just for that bit of chip into this Grimmsnarl.
Well, only one taunt available now for Fevzi, but still an option that he can go for and should be feeling pretty confident about. The Thundurus' move pool is now a little bit more limited, obviously taking away the taunt and any of those prankster moves that the Thundurus would love to use to cause chaos. But Fevzi seemed confident and comfortable to just start throwing out Thunderbolts, start dealing some damage as things were switching in. And here's a Pokemon we didn't see in the previous game. We didn't even get through all of Kevin's 4, so this could be the 4th Pokemon that he was hiding, considering the Torkoal was there.
The Venusaur is going to be taking a Thunderbolt on the switch in, though it lives that comfortably. Porygon 2 is being taunted, but as you said before, this is open team sheet. Porygon 2, knowing there's that opportunity, is just going to fire off attack into the Thundurus instead. So Kevin switching it up, recognizing not able to really go for the Trick Room this time around. Fevzi's going to be trying to counter it and just looking to switch it up.
Good solid play from both trainers. They get a little bit of what they want. Fevzi, of course, lands the taunt onto the Porygon, so the threat of being able to Trick Room is gone. But Kevin knows about that and plays it very, very wisely. Makes sure that the turn isn't completely wasted for this Porygon 2, and manages to throw out a nice little Ice Beam towards that Thundurus. As well, Kevin got in that Venusaur kind of free of charge. Little bit of chip damage from the Thunderbolt, but not enough to be really, really significant. And this Venusaur might just try and take over the game, even without the Trick Room. There is the potential for the Torkoal in the back, which could set it up to play the game at a completely different tempo.
Yeah, both of the players just pivoting a little bit. We saw that Registeel coming in for the Thunderous as well. Porygon 2 hiding in the back with the Grimmsnarl coming back out to play. This Venusaur, though, in its max, going for a big G-Max Vine Lash into the Incineroar. The Incineroar takes this very well. I mean, not very effective hit, but being able to set up that residual Vine Lash damage is going to be huge. But what's even bigger is the damage from the Flare Blitz into the Venusaur. But Venusaur still surviving and getting the Weakness Policy boost to boot.
Weakness Policy, a very dangerous item on the Venusaur. It's so hard to take down in this Gigantamax form, and it's already got the Vine Lash set up as well, so that's going to be a whole lot of residual damage, and that helps out against something like the Registeel. Of course, the Registeel wants to sit on the field, wants to land a little bit of recovery where it can, but that's going to be completely taken away by the pure damage output of this Vine Lash just between turns. So a whole lot going on there, and Grimmsnarl is now going to be the Pokemon throwing out a taunt.
And Grimmsnarl not wanting that Registeel to have the opportunity to set up, and Venusaur just looking to finish what it started. Max Ooze into the Incineroar with a nice little special attack boost to boot. So this Venusaur is sitting very dangerous at a +3 special attack now. Registeel, though, just opting to go for a Sand Tomb into this Grimmsnarl. A little bit of chip, but of course setting up its own residual damage here.
It's just a little bit underwhelming after you've seen the G-Max Vine Lash land to see exactly how much it's doing. And that Venusaur is very, very scary now. It should just be able to throw out one more massive attack from its Dynamax or Gigantamax form and land some really big damage. Weakness Policy, interestingly enough, the second most common item on Venusaur across Players' Cup 4 qualifiers. So there's a lot of options on your Venusaur. There's a lot of different ways to play it. I apologize. It's actually third. I counted a little bit wrong. But it's one of those options that you do have to respect, and something you have to think about a lot when you're playing in this open team sheet format.
Well, for sure, still very common, but maybe trying to see if the Flare Blitz boosted by the Sun, if the Torkoal coming in could have picked it up, and just trying to get the damage on the Venusaur to try and take it out before it's becoming the massive threat that we're seeing it as it is now. And I think Fevzi in a little bit of a weird spot. I mean, Fevzi does still have access to Dynamax and still has all 3 turns. The Venusaur, of course, on its last, but I mean, it has that turn of Dynamax to really just try and capitalize and make something happen. But Landorus, it's time to shine. We saw so much Max Landorus yesterday, and it's finally time for it to join the party today.
It's definitely overdue. The Landorus, knowing it can come out and put in a good amount of work here. Don't forget, there's no speed changes, and of course, there's no Sun in play either, so there's no speed boost through Chlorophyll in play for that Venusaur. Looks like Landorus knows about that, respects that, and doesn't want to take another hit after that really, really large amount of boosting. Really nicely played from Fevzi to try and get back in this game.
Of course, Max Quake cleaning up the Venusaur finally. The special attack boost is nice as well. Of course, we saw that the Porygon 2 is one of the Pokemon Kevin has in the back, and do imagine the potential of the Torkoal's there as well. So the special defense boost will be nice and handy. Registeel not able to do too much in its taunted form, just going for some chip into the Grimmsnarl instead with that body press.
Got to get some damage down, and while you're taunted, that's the best you can do. But the Registeel is getting worn pretty thin, particularly if there's a potential Torkoal in there that can't get immediately taken out. There's the Sand Tomb damage, so helping out a little bit there. The damage from Sand Tomb, the attack much lower than the Vine Lash, but still, that residual damage is really, really nice, and we've seen how impactful it's been over, I think, the past couple of Players' Cups, when players set it up early and are able to pick up knockouts that they might not usually be able to get their hands on.
Yeah, the residual damage, always so dangerous. So one more return of taunt on this Registeel here. So just opting it. It looks like Fevzi's eyeing up whether to keep it out and just be going for the attacking moves. This Porygon 2, I mean, it definitely can still pressure the Landorus here with an Ice Beam if it doesn't get dealt with. And we've seen how bulky the Porygon 2 can be in the past with the Eviolite. So to start off, Max Quake going straight into it. Porygon takes the hit, though the special defense boost is definitely going to be nice for Fevzi here, and it's just what this Porygon can withstand as Fevzi's throwing everything at it. Body press as well, chipping it down to under half, but Porygon sitting pretty.
That's the earlier setup from Grimmsnarl, being able to keep it safe and allow that Porygon to come in and do exactly what it needs. The White Herb, another choice on this Landorus. It's something that a number of players have, I think, gravitated to with the prevalence of Intimidate. But the Porygon 2 at the end of that turn, absolutely free to try and just set up the Trick Room. And that, to me, gives away a bit of a hint of what might be in the back after how impactful it was in the first game.
Oh yeah, the pairings of Torkoal and Porygon 2, as well as the infamous Torkoal and Venusaur. I'd be very surprised if we are not about to see that hitting the field, as Grimmsnarl is finally going to go down from that residual damage from the earlier Sand Tomb. So here it is, the mighty little Fire Turtle, and it is in its prime position now with that Trick Room being set.
That's exactly what Torkoal loves, Trick Room being up and facing down a Steel type as well. Probably feeling pretty good about being able to deal with that Registeel, especially now the Registeel's taken a good amount of damage just from the ferocious beating of the G-Max Vine Lash. So definitely in a much easier position to try and take it down. But it is left with just Torkoal and Porygon, so you've only got a couple options. And if this Trick Room can be played through by Fevzi, this game could turn around very, very quickly.
Of course, looking to survive this devastating eruption, the Registeel opting for a Protect. Eruption getting some good chip on the Landorus, and Porygon 2 looking to follow it up with an Ice Beam, but unable to fell it with that special defense boost earlier on, and Landorus getting the opportunity to be hitting into the Torkoal. It does live it pretty comfortably, but more importantly, also with that weather change. So yes, this Torkoal sitting there in Trick Room, but Fevzi's a lot more prepared for it this time around.
Super smart play from Fevzi there, acknowledging that you might get the same type attack bonus on the Max Quake, but the Max Rockfall gives you control of the weather, and now Kevin is down to his last two Pokemon. There's no way for him to switch in and out and reset the weather on that Torkoal. So I really think that's a smart heads-up play from Fevzi, and it may help him weather the storm for one, maybe two more turns a little bit when it comes to trying to deal with this Torkoal. The Landorus is exceptionally low, does have those special defense boosts, but the Eruption, not a super solid option for the Torkoal anymore. Has to try and mix it up a little bit and see maybe accuracy is going to come into play. Maybe Fevzi is going to find an opening that way.
All right, well, Torkoal, since Eruption's no longer too viable, going for that Burning Jealousy. Landorus living on 1, and Porygon 2 opting to go for the Recover instead. Kevin cannot allow a Pokemon to go down, so fortunately cannot clean up the Landorus this turn. But Fevzi, the Registeel's not going to be able to land an attack again, and Landorus just taking the opportunity for a fly.
No Sand Tomb from that Registeel. It's missed a couple of those already, but inaccurate moves have their trade-off, and if you hit it, the game would turn very, very quickly. The fantastic thing about the Landorus holding on there, but it's just in this position where it's only got 1 health, it's only going to get to land one more attack, but importantly, that attack could do some really big damage. The Torkoal trying to avoid that, though.
Of course, Registeel as well, not wanting to take any potential damage from the Torkoal. Porygon 2 just try attack, hit it into nothing here. The Landorus did target into the Torkoal though, so protects all around. No damage being done except for the Sand Chip on Kevin's side here.
Nice slow turn, and that's actually really good news for Fevzi. When you're playing against these Trick Rooms, you want to be able to try and stall them out. That's exactly what you need to do, and turns like that may look, absolutely fine for both trainers, but they're definitely more advantageous than the trainer who's trying to work through a couple of turns to get to the end of the Trick Room.
Yeah, Torkoal trying to capitalize where it can, Burning Jealousy, finally picking up the KO on the Landorus. Porygon 2 following up with a tri-attack. This Registeel, doesn't take that very well, but it does take the burn, which that is going to hurt in more ways than one. It is going to set up the Iron Defense, but the recovery that it would get from the leftovers is kind of negated now.
No recovery coming through on this turn, and this looks to me like the Registeel's just setting up for an end game kind of situation where it gets to target down that Porygon. Of course, body press based off the defense, meaning you need an iron defense boost to land these knockouts. There's the end of the Trick Room, and this is going to be a very close game. The Torkoal definitely in a little bit of danger now. Not able to attack first, has to take one, possibly two attacks in advance. The Reflect is up, so it's going to try and, you know, stay there. But you've got through the Trick Room. That is the most important part, I think. And Fevzi just taking his time in the menus, just going through it, making sure his board position is thought through properly. And being able to shut down this Porygon is going to be important. Saving the Thundurus could just be the way to do it.
Oh yeah, definitely heading into this end game. Neither of these Pokemon can be disrespected, so really having to think through what to be targeting, what to be shutting down. I mean, we've seen yesterday what Porygon 2 can pull out in an end game, but Torkoal as well is nothing to shy away at. Thundurus starting stuff off with a Prankster taunt here into the Porygon, so no more Trick Room as well, no opportunity to be recovering for a couple turns. Registeel instead just taking its opportunity to be setting up further, but Kevin, knowing about the potential of taunt, hitting into the Thundurus, picking up a good amount of damage here, but not quite able to pick up the KO and giving it the opportunity to just go for that Citrus Berry. Torkoal just wanting to try and get this chip, hitting a massive amount of damage, but unable to pick up the KO on either as the Sandstorm finishes up.
No more Sandstorm, but most importantly, no Trick Room for Kevin. Really well played, knowing how much the Pokemon on his side of the field can take. Fevzi capitalizes on that turn, makes sure that the Trick Room's not an option. Kevin does respect it. Kevin does throw out the Ice Beam in return, but that did allow Registeel the turn to set up another Iron defense, which means its Body Press is going to be doing a whole heaping of damage. And then it's just down to the Torkoal. Looks to me like Fevzi's really mulling this one over, wanting to make sure he's able to stay in a great position. But this could be the turn where he wraps it up if it all goes in his favor and potentially sends us to this game 3.
It's definitely a dangerous situation, though. Both of these Pokemon just sitting at a very sad 22 HP, but the fact that there is no Trick Room set means he does have the opportunity to make something happen regardless of how low they are. So Torkoal just going for the Protect here, just wanting to try and stay safe as the Porygon 2 maybe try and make something happen, but it does have to withstand this Thunderbolt here, which it does easily despite this critical hit. But Body Press from Registeel looking to come in and clean it up, which it does. So this Porygon 2 finally going down, and it's all up to this Torkoal in this really tricky endgame.
That's a winning turn for Fevzi, getting rid of that Porygon, not taking any damage outside of this little bit of burn, and the Torkoal playing it maybe a fraction too safe there, maybe needing to try and weave in an attack, but Fevzi calling that one beautifully, saying, I don't think you're even going to try with the Torkoal this turn, and I'll just deal with that on the following turn. It has to take the Thunderbolt, and that's not even going to need any help from the Registeel, as Fevzi sends us towards game number 3 with a fantastic, well-played, close endgame.
I'm really excited that we get to go for it.
Any adaptations from either trainer? I know there's some really good changes from Fevzi in that game, and I wonder exactly how Kevin is going to respond to those.
Well, to start off, it's not, and we're going to see that Porygon 2 hit the field next to this Grimmsnarl yet again, and on Fevzi's end, of course, with the Incineroar and Thundurus, perfect way to try and slow down Kevin's setup lead here.
And we're right in the same position we were at the beginning of game number 2, where there's 2 options to taunt. There's a fake out, there's obviously a taunt in response from the Grimmsnarl, so trying to find that early advantage, really important. But the onus really is on Fevzi to shut down the potential Trick Room, and maybe he's going to run the exact same routes that he did in game number 1.
Not quite, though. We are going to see that fake out come out, but followed up with a Thunder Wave into that Porygon 2 slot. A way to definitely try and slow it. And, I mean, it is going to take a taunt in return, but being able to get that paralysis on the Porygon 2 is definitely at least nice to start off here. And Incineroar does still have some pressure as well with its own taunt.
Incineroar's the only thing that can be taunting this turn, thanks to the taunt in response from Grimmsnarl on Kevin's side of the field, so this There's now one option for the Thunderous. That's going to be the Thunderbolt. But that can at least start dealing damage and maybe catch something on the switch in. Getting the Thunder Wave down on the Porygon, I think, is more of a bit of insurance for the late game, where it was weaving in Ice Beams, which were a little bit annoying, and it just helps you get that chance, get that opportunity to take a turn where Porygon isn't able to play the game. So everything looks like it's going right here for Fevzi, and this could be a really big turn if Kevin's played into it. A critical hit, huge there.
Definitely a big turn. The Grimmsnarl did take the opportunity to set up a Reflect, but is still going to get massive damage with the critical hit. But Porygon 2, unable to do anything, as it is going to take a turn of full paralysis. So that we've already putting in a little bit of work.
I would have been curious to see what the Porygon 2 was going for. It did move last, but it was always going to be moving last in this turn. And if it was the Trick Room, that could be absolutely huge. Of course, this could have been Fevzi calling the play from earlier, acknowledging that he knows about the taunts. You know, he plays to that and goes for the Ice Beam instead. Just trying to get rid of that Grimmsnarl. But Grimmsnarl took another turn, managed to set up both of its screens before being felled, and now the Porygon has been taunted.
Though, Kevin, knowing about that risk and the possibility, just going for the same thing as last game and just firing off an Ice Beam into the Thunderous to start getting some good damage out on the field. And Venusaur going to be joining that pesky little duck and try and make something happen out here.
Venusaur kind of has to be the focal point now, I think, for Kevin. Really looking to try and play around that, put on a lot of pressure with it, and of course, the ferocious beating from G-Max Vine Lash. It's going to take Fevzi a couple of turns to wear through something like this Venusaur. The Reflect and Light Screen are both in play, so got to respect that, got to make sure that the damage keeps going down and is able to start stacking up. This Porygon's in a lot of trouble though, and I wouldn't be shocked to see that maybe change out for the Torkoal and Kevin play a faster mode. We haven't looked at the Chlorophyll activation on Venusaur once yet in this set.
Well, we're not going to see it this turn, but we are going to see that Venusaur go for the max anyways. Start trying to make something happen here. Fevzi, of course, just hiding that Thunderous in the back and bringing out the Registeel instead to maybe try and tank a hit here. So, going to come down to the Venusaur and Max Ooze, but goes into the Thunderous slot, which means it's not doing anything to this Steel type. So, one of the turns of Max being wasted here, and Fevzi, instead of going for the Flare Blitz this time around, opting to just go for the Parting Shot. So no damage being dealt, but no weakness policy boost, and a negative special attack to boot.
Fantastic turn from Fevzi. The Registeel, such an impactful switch in there into the Maxus, able to take that so well, and it also switches in to take an Ice Beam. Registeel doesn't care about either of those attacks and is almost back at full health after the Leftovers recovery. So a really good turn, a nice pivot, and the drop on this Venusaur. The Venusaur hasn't had its weakness policy activated. It would likely be able to do that off something like the Incineroar, but Fevzi, knowing about that from the team sheet and the effect it had in Game 1, maybe feeling it brought the game a little bit too close for comfort and wanted to play around that. So really well played turn there, using kind of knowledge and information from previous games to be able to play this one out.
Thunderous, though, able to go for a Thunder Wave after switching in and out, but misses it instead. So it will take a G-Max Vine Lash in return, and Kevin gets the opportunity to start setting up that residual damage. Obviously, it put in a lot of work in the last game, so getting it set up is fantastic. Registeel finally connecting a Sand Tomb here into the Porygon 2 slot. Not that it'll do too much damage, but also stacking residual damage as well, as it fires back with an Ice Beam to try and bring this Thunderous down.
This Thunderous has taken a lot of damage on the switch in, but I don't think it minds too much. It's still around on the field for next turn and does have the option now. There's no taunt from the Grimmsnarl to throw out those Thunder Waves and cause more problems. The Registeel still sitting pretty healthy though. It manages to land the Sand Tomb, which has been important, and get a good little bit of residual damage going, something to help out the Porygon. Of course, we do have to respect that the Porygon's taunt ended, but guess what? Fevzi's made sure that there's a Pokemon with taunt right back on the field and be able to set that up as and when he pleases. So could be putting himself in another really good position as this Venusaur is approaching its last turn of the Gigantamax.
The taunt coming out onto the Porygon 2 here, so no shenanigans from the Porygon 2. Venusaur is just going to go clean up the KO on the Thundurus with the Max Ooze and is going to get a special attack boost, bringing it back to neutral after that earlier parting shot from the Incineroar. So doesn't really get to do too much from its max here other than the Vine Lash residual effect, but that can also prove to be potentially huge. Registeel not really facing too much of a threat right now. Going to take this opportunity to get an Iron Defense up, which means its body presses will become lethal. But Porygon 2 just looking to fish for something with the Tri-Attack and a little bit of chip here.
At that point, the Tri-Attack isn't there to deal the damage. It's just there to try and get one of those secondary effects that it does have the chance to land. The Sand Tomb damage starting to soften up that Porygon, maybe put it in range for a body press a little bit earlier. But now, the option given to Fevzi, does he want to bring in the Incineroar once again? Does he want to bring in the Landorus? Fevzi does still have access to the Dynamax turns, not used those yet, so could be saving that for the potential Landorus that we have the privilege of knowing is in the back. But most importantly, Kevin's Dynamax is done. Very limited impact from this Venusaur, and I think that might hurt as we go through the rest of this game.
Of course, with Dynamax, it can be such an impactful thing on the game, but being able to withstand your opponent's Dynamax and save yours for the end can really be a game changer. And Incineroar hitting the field here, it means it can do a fake out into the Venusaur. Registeel going into the Porygon 2 doesn't quite pick up the KO, but Porygon being taunted can't really do anything about its low HP and just has to fire off a Tri-Attack, and yet again, no secondary effect.
Tri-Attack struggling a little bit here to be as impactful as it like. The Registeel, though, has been bought rather low, and that could be something that potentially can get cleaned up by the Torkoal that might be in the back. This Porygon 2, though, getting worn so low, just clinging on after the Sand Tomb. So at the end of this turn, Porygon, if it stays on the field, is going to be taken out, and this kind of gives Fevzi the opportunity to focus up a little bit more on the Venusaur.
Yeah, this Venusaur, I mean, it is a neutral, but it can still offer some pressure out on the field here. You can't disrespect it, especially with the ability to go for these sleep powders. As we see, it connects into that Incineroar, letting the cat take a little cat nap here, as fortunately it's not going to be able to do too much, but the Registeel does get to do something as it finally cleans up this poor little duck, and the Porygon is gone, which also means access to Trick Room no longer available.
No more Trick Room. This Torkoal is, if it's the Pokemon in the back, will be struggling to move first at any given moment. But the Registeel there, just making sure it didn't take any unnecessary damage from the Tri-Attack that could potentially be thrown out by a Porygon. And now there's the Torkoal with no Trick Room. So this endgame gets a little bit dicey, I think. The Torkoal would be able to start cleaning up something like the Registeel, but we have to remember Fevzi still has his Landorus in the back, still has access to try and deal with things that way. So a number of options for Fevzi, just playing out a very kind of heads up and forward thinking endgame.
Yeah, the options aren't up for Kevin, though. This Venusaur is going to be the fastest thing on the field now, since the sun is finally set for it. It is going to just try and go for an Earth Power into the Registeel to clean it up, but Registeel going for the Protect, and Incineroar only taking the one turn of sleep, waking up and getting a huge knockout onto this Venusaur here, and I think sealing up any chances for Kevin to take this game.
Massive turn for Fevzi. I can't understate how good it is for him to have that Incineroar wake up at that time. Incineroar being able to take advantage of the sun that Torkoal just set for him, landing a Flare Blitz into not a Dynamax or Gigantamax version of the Venusaur, knowing, hey, you got the extra sun, and even with the Reflect in play, wasn't enough to take a hit from this Incineroar. So really nicely cleaning it up, learning a little bit about how much damage it did last time when it was in its Dynamax form. This means Torkoal now has to face down a Landorus and a Registeel. It's going to be the slowest thing on the field, and Fevzi hasn't used his Dynamax yet. He has no need to use that so far, and could just use that to clean up this game with style, punching his ticket to the global finals with a huge Landorus play.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a sad Torkoal here. I mean, with all of its friends gone. It's gonna have to stand up to this Landorus by itself, but Landorus being one of the things to reliably be able to take it down means it's not going to be doing anything here. So fantastically played by these players. It's gonna take the opportunity to just make sure no shenanigans happen, fire off this Max Quake, pick up this KO, and just seal the deal going on to Global Finals.
It's Landorus once again Dynamaxing and throwing out key crucial moves. It doesn't quite get the knockout on Torkoal, but Brave Registeel that sat on the field for the whole game will get the pleasure and privilege of cleaning that one up. So Fevzi, the first player we're pushing on to the global